It's now time for On the Line with Cheryl Wilkerson. The conversation will range from local dialogue to international. This show is meant to enlighten, inform, and to inspire. On the Line with Cheryl Wilkerson begins now.
Hello and welcome to On the Line. I'm your host, Cheryl Wilkerson. Glad you could join me on this Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. We had a time change recently, changed the show from noon to 11. So I'm so glad that you've been able to change times with me. You know, Election Day is right around the corner. It's really important. I think people are understanding every day about how important this election thing is. And even though some interesting things have happened in the past, I think it's made us more aware of what's going on around us, how important so-called smaller elections are, and the whole gamut. So today we're going to talk to a young lady, and this is going to be an interesting talk, and I will tell you why. Because I have talked to many registrars. I've talked to maybe 4 of them so far this year. Off mic, but I've talked to them. But this young lady that's joining us today, she has the perspective from here in Virginia as well as across the nation. And that is going to be an interesting conversation. We say hello, good morning, and welcome to Constance Hargrove. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great, Cheryl. Thank you.
She is the election director for Pima County. Am I saying that correctly? Pima County?
Yes.
What are you doing in Pima County when you started out right here in good old Virginia? Give us the background of you starting out in elections here in Virginia and tell us about your travels.
Absolutely. So I started out in elections in the city of Richmond, actually. I started out at the bottom as a senior assistant registrar, worked my way up to the deputy registrar in the city of Richmond, and I worked there for 16 years under 2 different general registrars, actually, Alice Lynch and J. Kirk Showalter. And then I migrated over to Chesterfield County, where I was deputy registrar there for a few years and became the director of elections in 2017 in Chesterfield County. I resigned from that position in April of this year, 2022. Had a little tap on the shoulder. I don't know if you guys, your listeners, understand the tap of God, and God just kind of say, hey, you know, there's something else out there I want you to go take a look at. And it was in Pima County, Arizona. Pima County, Arizona.
All
yes.
the way to Arizona? He was telling you to go there?
I moved across the country, and amazingly enough, it was all in about 30 days. So it was a very quick turnaround. They needed a director out here. The director retired in January, and they were trying to implement new vote centers and new technology. And so I answered the call.
Now that's a whole lot right there. You're not just coming in to be director, but I mean, you've got to implement new systems and everything. That didn't scare you just a little bit?
Actually, no. Okay. It did not. I have experience in implementing electronic poll books, both in the city of Richmond and in Chesterfield County. We implemented a new system for our early voting. And the idea of vote centers, for my Virginia listeners, vote centers are like early voting locations where anyone in the county or city can show up and vote. They do not have to go to a precinct to vote. And so on election day, that's what we do here. We have vote centers now, and it's like an early voting location. And the electronic poll books that we use in Chesterfield County are very similar to the ones that I implemented here in Arizona.
Some familiarity. I can't say that word, but I get it. So early voting here in Virginia started on Friday the 23rd. Do you have that also in Arizona or not?
So the wonderful thing about my job in Arizona as the elections director is that I do not have to have anything to do with early voting except for producing the ballots. So my office produces the ballots. The recorder's office, we're bifurcated here in Pima County, where the recorder is technically the registrar. And the recorder handles all of the voter registration and early voting. And my department, as the elections director, I am responsible for election day. Of course, we do the programming of the equipment and the ballots, but election day is my domain.
Having the experience that you've had here in Virginia, in Richmond, Chesterfield County, and now being out there in Arizona, let's just get back to the basics. Why should people get out to vote? Why should people make an effort to get registered to vote? Why does it really, really matter?
That is a great question. And people should get registered to vote and not just register, but actually participate and vote and be an educated voter so that they have some control and say over what's going on in their cities, counties, the state, and nationally. I know people believe that, their vote doesn't count, but it does. One vote can make a difference, and especially in a recount situation. One vote makes a huge difference in a recount situation. But on the local level, you really need to understand that you are controlling what's going on in that area. Mm-hmm. And so I apologize. You are controlling what's going on in that area. And if you don't vote, you have no voice. You have no voice. You have no voice. And
none. As registrars, do you all get around the table from different localities and talk about the fact that in the past, I don't know if it's been recently, but in the past, midterm elections, it was a low turnout. What can be done about that? Or do you see the tide changing?
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Many years ago, I would have to say many years ago, because I believe the last couple of elections in Virginia during midterms, we had a great turnout. Record turnout, actually, especially in 2018, there was record turnout in Chesterfield County. And I think that's happening across the country because more people are focused on the president now, mm-hmm. and they're seeing how Congress actually, can make or break what the president actually wants to do. Mm-hmm. So they can either support it or they can shoot the bill down and say, no, we're not going to have that happen. And that affects all of us. So I think the midterms are going to be big.
And I suppose, I'm just guessing, you can correct me, I'm supposing that started when Barack Obama was elected and people saw how he couldn't even nominate a Supreme Court justice. I'm thinking that's when people realized the power of these elections. That's
possible, but the interesting thing about that, when Barack Obama was elected in 2008, there was a lot of interest, a lot of excitement, especially among the younger generation. Mm-hmm. They were motivated to go out to vote. And then we began to see, as the years went on, voter apathy setting in again. Young people not really caring anymore because they didn't feel like anything really changed for them. Oh. But they don't understand that the wheels of justice move very slowly, and legislation takes sometimes years to get through, and it's not a one-time thing. You have to keep going back, voting, making sure that the candidate, the person that's in Congress that you want to be there, can continue to be there to push forward the agendas that affect us every day.
Do you think, or have you seen examples of where people have stayed in office just because, they've been there so long, I know their name, I'll just vote for them again? Have you seen examples of that?
Absolutely. Name recognition is huge. People do not take the time to educate themselves about the other candidates, and they see a name that they recognize. And normally the individuals who are already in office have more money, and they can put out into the airwaves, social media, newspaper, television. They can have more rallies and get their name out there. And people remember that. The more you hear something, the more you're going to be seeing that and hearing that. So you're walking to that voting booth and mark the name that you know. Yes.
You just talked about being educated. As election director of Pima County in Arizona, what would you suggest? That's the word I should use. What should you suggest? How do you suggest people educate themselves on the candidates that are running in their locality? We have people listening to the show from all over. So what do you tell them when they say, oh, I don't know anything about any of the candidates? What do you tell them? How do you tell them to get themselves educated?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. I was on a panel with the League of Women Voters last weekend, and the League of Women Voters, of course, is national. They're not all over the country, and they have what's called a Vote 411. And what they do, they send out questionnaires to all of the candidates across the country, and they have them send that information back in about, asking them the pertinent questions, what their agenda is, what they plan to do for the economy, and just they all get the same questionnaire and they answer that. And so Vote 411 is a great place to start. However, with social media, you can always find, they should have a web page set up, and you can go and you can check out their web page. But don't just do that. You also want to check out the people that they're associated with, just in case what they're saying sounds great, but the people they're associated with actually have a different agenda. And maybe they're not being honest about what they're actually saying to the public.
I know one thing that affects many people is the fact that we get bombarded with commercials. And I think there comes a time where we start tuning it out. Constance, my idea is that if you're running for political office and you make a commercial, it can only say the things that you're going to do. It cannot mention your opponent, what they did back in 1978 or whatever. Tell me what you are going to do for me today in 2022. That would be my rule if I could put a rule into law.
And I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with that. Just give us the facts. Tell us about yourself. We're not, concerned about the opponent. We can go figure that out on our own. But you're right. All of the fighting and the negative ads really turns people off. It definitely turns young people off. So we definitely want to make sure that anybody who's running for office, if we know them personally, if they're our friends, just tell them, hey, don't do that. That's just not the way to go.
Stay positive. I'm speaking, if you just joined us, I'm speaking with the election director. She's in Pima County, Arizona. Her name is Constance Hargrove. So she has a full look at what's going on across the nation. She started out here in Virginia. I want to ask you about, and this might be, you might be Cheryl, you're thinking too much. And if so, you can just tell me that, okay? But I wonder about the machines that we vote on. I wonder why. Can you tell me why the machines aren't the same all over? Why are there different companies making different machines? It seems to me if everything was uniform, then that would weed out a lot of nefarious actions right there.
Cheryl, that is a great question. And, the real answer is that the United States is so different. Every state is different. They run elections differently. They use different technology or no technology at all. And the way that our voting system and equipment is set up actually makes it more difficult to be able to affect nationally an election, because you would have to coordinate every different machine. You'd have to get a hold of all of the ballots. You'd have to affect all of the electronic poll books, and they're all different. Oh. And you would have to know intimately what each city, county does to run their elections. So it actually makes it more difficult. So having different vendors is actually a good thing. It's competition. It makes equipment more affordable because there are not that many election vendors. Mm-hmm. And if you only had one, that would be a monopoly.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And it would be easier for someone to actually plant something into a code in one system, and then it affects the entire country.
So it benefits us to have different machines across the United States.
It actually does.
Okay. All right. I can take that. I have to regurgitate on that one. I have to think about that, but it does make sense what you're saying. And then, I think about, who's owning the machines. I don't know. Constance, tell me, who owns the machine or who owns the company that makes the machine? Is there any way that, suppose I owned a machine and suppose I voted strictly independent and Could I do something to make sure my machines are leaning that way? Is that possible? Is there checks and balances of some sort?
Yeah. So as far as owning the machine, so each county, city that purchases the equipment, they actually own the equipment. The majority, I would say, possibly they do their own programming, but the vendor, of course, is the owner of the software that actually controls the machines, right? And it would be very difficult for an individual in a city or a county to program a machine that way. I mean, you could do it, but it would be so noticeable that it's just not going to work. And here is the key. So before each election, and every state does this, before each election, we're required to conduct what is called logic and accuracy testing. So LNA testing for short. And what we do with that, the party representatives come in. They're there to observe this process. We have ballots that are pre-marked and tallied. And so we run those ballots through all of the voting equipment that will be used in an election. And the results should equal what is there. And so the parties are there to observe it. And in Virginia, that's pretty much done on a local level. Here in Arizona, we do the parties, political parties actually mark their own ballots, come up with their own totals, and we test those. We do a logic and accuracy test with those. Then we do our own logic and accuracy testing at the county level. And then the Secretary of State comes in and does a logic and accuracy test as well. So it is very difficult with all the checks and balances for someone to actually do that.
You just outlined at least three levels of checks and balances, correct?
Yes.
That's good to know. Those are things that the average Joe Blow, we don't know that. And we hear the stories in the news media about this fraud or this one took these ballots, and we don't know what's going on. So this information that you are giving us today, it's invaluable to us. It gives us some sort of a roadmap. And when you say it's being done in every state, you know, that should be comforting to us at least. Tell me this. How did you actually get into this field? And what would you tell somebody that is going along the lines of they're volunteering, maybe they're a young person right now, they're trying to get people out to vote. How could they find themselves being an election director?
So I actually ended up being, in elections accidentally. And I believe the majority of my colleagues did the same thing. So you kind of start working in the elections office. And honestly, no one knows what the elections director or the elections office does unless they actually work inside an office. And so you kind of take a job in the office and you get sucked in. You either love it or you hate it. And so elections is one of those jobs where you have to have a unique personality to work in elections because there are so many moving pieces and there's so much to get done. There are lots of checks and balances, and accuracy is key. There is no, okay, maybe it'll work. No, you can't do maybe it will work. So you need people who are very conscientious to actually work in elections. You just can't have anybody working in elections. And unfortunately, at this time, there is not a degree that will train you to be an election administrator. So, I consider myself an elections administrator, and there is not a degree program. It is on-the-job training. And I would tell anybody, if you're interested in working in elections, especially if you're a young person, a college student, that you go in and work part-time prior to an election. Like right now, where the early voting, absentee voting is beginning, they always need people to work. Go in and do that and learn the process from the inside, and then you can determine whether or not it's a good fit. Because poli-sci, political science, will not teach you what you need to know about running elections.
I navigate between Norfolk and Richmond, and in both localities, I'm seeing registrar's office saying we need workers, and some of them, they were telling me they have increased the pay for election day. I mean, they've almost like doubled the pay, but like here in Hampton Roads, 7 localities, everybody is looking for poll workers.
Yeah. So poll workers, it is a long day. It is a very long day, but it's a rewarding day. Anybody that has worked, they've always told me they love it. They keep coming back. So typically you have people who've been doing it for 30 years, but they're aging out now.
Yes.
So we do need young people to step up and take the mantle, go out and volunteer to work on election day. And I mean, I know people keep saying, well, why can't we split the day? Because then you need double the people. If you can't get the number of people you need now, how are you going to get double the people and be sure that they're going to show up on election day? So, the registrars, elections directors' worst nightmare is nobody shows up in a precinct or a vote center on election day. So we don't want that. But young people really need to get involved. They can help with the process. They can help, fine tune the process. They will have a voice because most elections directors want to hear from the poll workers. How can we make it better? So I admonish anybody who's interested and who's listening to volunteer in elections.
I just want to tell people here in Virginia listening that, when my mom was here and I would take her to vote, they would come out to the car. I didn't have to worry about getting the wheelchair out and all of that. They would gladly come to the car and take care of Mom. I know we have new laws here in Virginia. Like I said, early voting started last Friday, but you can vote. You can register to vote in Virginia on Election Day and actually go vote. You can get a provisional ballot. If there's any discrepancy or anything, there are numbers you can call that we will have on hand, especially around Election Day when you go to the polls. If you have any problems, it seems here in Virginia at least, they're making it very easy for people to get out and vote. No excuses. And as far as the long day, you were talking about the fact that when election poll workers go in, they have to stay in the whole day, right?
That's correct.
So they go in, I don't know, 5:30?
5 a.m.
5 a.m. And they have to stay until, how do they know when the day has wrapped up?
So after the last voter leaves and votes, then they can start closing their precincts. In Virginia, they can start closing their precincts. So normally around 8 o'clock, people have wrapped up and they're on their way out the door. For smaller precincts in Virginia, it could be even a little sooner. It depends on the size of the election and the size of the precinct, of course, and the county. But I would say, it would be probably around 9 at the latest that most precincts would wrap up.
And when you're saying wrap up, Constance, does everybody leave at one time, or can I say, okay, I cleaned up my area, I can leave, or does everyone exit at the same time?
No, everyone leaves at the same time because in Virginia, you have to sign what's called a statement of results. And that statement of results is actually everything that happened during the day on Election Day. And when you sign that statement, you're saying, I observed, I was here, I know what happened. And so if you leave prior to that, then you're signing a document and you have no idea what's happening after that. So they are required to stay until everybody is walking out the door.
Just nationally, just your gut feeling, what do you feel the turnout is going to be November 8th?
Wow, that's a great question. Based on my experience in Virginia last year and what I'm seeing here and saw for the primary here, I am expecting a fairly high turnout. I would expect, we're used to a smaller turnout in midterm elections, as you stated earlier. I think we're going to break that barrier and we're going to see quite a few people turn out to vote. Hopefully young people, but quite a few people turn out to vote for this election.
That is some good news. I know in the city of Richmond, I listened to an interview not long ago, and they have a young black man that has taken over. He's the director in Richmond. I've forgotten his name, but just to hear the enthusiasm in his voice and all, it was really good. And he was the first Black person to have that position in the city of Richmond.
Keith Ballmer is his name.
Okay, thank you. See, I knew you knew. That's why you are where you are, because you know these things. Yeah, and he's young, right?
Yes, he's definitely much younger than me. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's young, but he's out there and he's got the enthusiasm, and it sounds like he's got the drive to get it done. These are very important positions. That's one reason why I want to have you on. I want people to understand how important these positions are. It's like people don't register to vote, and you don't understand how important it is that you register to vote so you can be on a jury. You know, that's important that our faces are there. I know the sentiment is try to get out of jury duty. I get that. But I was having a conversation with a friend the other day. I love jury duty, and I especially love grand jury duty. These are things that make our world better, and we shouldn't be running from them. We should be embracing them. And the fact that you have gone across this nation to help people in Pima, am I saying it right? Pima County?
Pima, yes.
Arizona. Mm-hmm. I just think that is fabulous. You cut your teeth here in Virginia. You're going over there. You're helping those people. That's an important role. That is important. And my hat goes off to you. It truly does.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, I this one thing I really just want to point out is that the sentiment of most people when they walk into an elections office, regardless of where it is and whoever they encounter, is that you guys are so happy. And it's really interesting that people say that, because a lot of work goes into what we do, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of long days. And they're right. Everyone who is working in this job and they're a permanent employee, they love what they're doing, and they want to do the best they can for the voters of whatever county or city that they're involved in. And so, you know, it looks easy. It really looks easy from the outside. It is not an easy job. It is stressful trying to make sure that we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's so that every voter who is eligible to vote can cast a ballot. So I just wanted to put that out there.
That is wonderful, and that's true, because where I vote, there's a lady. I don't know how old she is, but I tell her all the time she has to be a model, because she is the most beautiful woman, and she's got this salt and pepper hair. And half of my joy going to vote is to see her every time it's time to vote. That's exactly what I do. I don't even know her name, but I have to tell everybody the background of how I, quote unquote, air quotes, met you was through your sister. You have a sister, and okay, so I love Costco. And I met her in Costco, and she started telling me all about you, and I'm so glad that she did. She is super, super, super proud of you. I guess you know that, but I just want to say that to you because she really is proud of you.
Yeah, she is. I love my baby sister.
So when is the next time you're going to make a trip back to Virginia?
Oh, my goodness. I was hoping it was going to be this year, but, you know how laws change, and we may have recounts at the end of the year. Yes. So it may be next year before I can get back home.
We have about 30 seconds left. If you, Constance Hargrove, would just tell people one more time why it's so important to go out here and vote.
It is so important to go vote so that your voice can be heard and you have a seat at the table.
That's it. Thank you so much for joining me on this Sunday morning. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. There you have, ladies and gentlemen. If you were sitting on the fence before and you were thinking, I may not, please do your homework. Find out about these candidates. I actually have people that will hit me up on the day of election and say, who should I vote for? That's not the way we're going to do this. Be informed and be involved. And remember the words Constance Hargrove and what she has told us today. You all have a fabulous Sunday. We'll talk again next Sunday. Take care. We love you. Bye-bye.